You think about Elon Musk and like the robo taxis. I'm watching that, and I'm actually thinking about non-emergent transportation, which has been a massive issue in Arkansas for a long time that we haven't really been able to crack that nut. But I think too, it's also there's like a culture aspect. It's like, do we do things today? Do we plant trees today, knowing that we may never see them to be full grown, but that they know that it's better for future generations? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you're gonna have to stand before God and account for everything you ever did.
This is the Real Russellville with Tyler Riley, and I am with Aaron Pilkington. And listen, you were actually referred to come on by one of our listeners, and after a brief conversation, I could not have agreed more. I was like, let's bring Aaron on the show. You're doing incredible things. Thank you so much for jumping on. And
yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me out, and I'm excited to be on, and a fan of the show, and think it's great what we're doing for the area and letting people know what's going on. So.
And you're doing great things for the area. Start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So, I'm Aaron Pilkington. I live over in Knoxville. I represent District 45 in the Arkansas House of Reps, so it's all Johnson, a lot of Pope County too, and then like the London, Augsburg, a little bit near Dover, and some of Russellville. And so been doing that for, I just won my 5th term.
Let's go.
Yeah, so we're going full steam ahead. But yeah, I'd always been interested in politics and always been involved from a young age. And back in 2016, they were looking for someone to run, and I just stepped up to the plate and won. And, luckily I knew enough about how to campaign and stuff. I knew what I was doing. So, the time I was, I think when I filed, I was actually 25 years old.
25.
Yeah. So when I was sworn in, I was 26. And so, of course, now I'm 33. So I've been here for a second, but I'm still one of the youngest still. So it is kind of funny. Like I'm looking around, like in our Pope County delegation, I've got the highest seniority currently in the House, but I'm also the youngest, and so it's really kind of funny to be in that situation. But it's great, and I love to serve, and the first thing I ever got involved in was like a school millage campaign back when I was in high school, and we lost. But it's like you learn more from your losses than you do your wins.
That's right.
And so I couldn't even vote in that, but it just showed me really early on, like, hey, if you want something to change, like, you got to step up to the plate. Like, you can't expect someone else to do anything about it. And so that just kind of lit that bug in me. And then I've been involved and worked on campaigns ever since. And gosh, here we are now, I think I was 16 or 17 at the time, and now I'm 33. So I don't know, you do the math, how many years later, so 15 years later, whatever. So, but it's great. I mean, I really enjoy it. It's frustrating at times, but, it's good work, and we're doing good stuff for Arkansas, which is the kind of the most exciting part. I mean, there's a lot of things you don't really see on the news because they just don't they're not.
It's not like a national attention type of thing.
Yeah. It's funny. I always tell people all the time, like, we vote on around like 2,000 bills every session. It's like, how many do you probably actually hear about on the news? And so, some are like technical correction bills and this and that, but there's like a lot of good stuff. And I always say this all the time, like my colleagues, like, we do a really poor job in letting people know some of the cool stuff we're doing and the good stuff we're doing, that people may go like, oh yeah, like, you guys actually do care. And like, because there's always this feeling like, oh, you politicians, yada, yada. And it's like, we're doing a lot of good work, and maybe, and I think, Arkansas has grown a lot in the past few years. I mean, you see it here in Russellville, you see all the growth going on. And so, it's great, to know that you're kind of help contributing to that kind of environment that allows for this type of growth, which is exciting,
In Arkansas, for like the longest amount of time, I would call it kind of like a sleeper state, because so many people are finding the value of relocating here, opening up businesses here, and with growth comes different policies that probably have to change. And I bet you see a lot of that is things grow, so does our mindset.
Yeah, no, I think so, and growth can be scary to a lot of people. I'm sure you heard the term like NIMBY, not in my backyard. And, I always joke that I'm a what's it, YIMBY? Yes, in my backyard. I mean, I got polled the other day because I live in Knoxville near the nuclear plant, which is in my district, Arkansas Nuclear 1. And they were like, if we did fuel rod conversion, spent fuel rod conversion to make fuel, like apparently there's enough at A&O to like basically like fuel like all of Arkansas for the next 10 years or something crazy. Or maybe it's like 100. I mean, it's something crazy.
That's a real big thing that's coming up right now. And people don't realize the impact and the benefit that we could have from that.
And so I got pulled and like, would you be okay if one of those facilities was located? And I was like, hell yeah.
Let's
go.
I'm
like, it's safe. Like, and I know the information on it. Like, I'm ready to go. Now, granted, I think some people would literally just be like, no way. And it's like, but granted, you educate yourself. You kind of learn what's going on. But I'm a little more like, yes, let's do it. Let's get going. But yeah, I mean, as things come in and the culture changes, there are like laws that need to be changed and fixed and even just to enhance. I mean, one of the things, so I work with a group called Right to Start, and it's a pro-entrepreneurship group.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things is how do we get policies to make it easier to start a business, to start a job? Because a lot of job growth comes in those areas. And so, how do we get rid of barriers that have kind of been there in the past? And maybe they were there for good reasons, maybe they weren't, to make it to where people will start a business. And so, I think as we bring new people in, a lot of young people are here in the state. People forget. I mean, we're a great state to retire in, but we're also a great state to be young in, especially if you have a young family. I kind of joke, it's like, maybe it's not so great if you're single, but once you're married, like from being married with kids till like you retire, like Arkansas is a fantastic state to be in. And a lot of those entrepreneurs are those people who are married, have families, and are now wanting to take their careers to the next level. And so, yeah, how do we make it to where you can do that? Because reality is like you want the next Sam Walton to come from Arkansas again.
That's
like
right.
You've got to create an environment to where, or the next Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, like you've got to create an environment to where those people can thrive and they don't feel stifled by their government. And it's real easy because a lot of times regulations are just like, good intentions that have ended up creating problems and making it to where people say it is so cumbersome to do these things or to try to run a business that I won't even try, or I did try and it was terrible and I'm never going to try again. And like, that's just, you don't want that environment. So that's, one of the things I think too, is we try to like look and really capitalize on the growth that we've seen in the area recently. Is like, okay, we've got the people, they're coming in, there's a spirit, there's an entrepreneurship vibe that I think is going on in Arkansas. Like, how do we make sure that we, make it even better?
It's kind of like the Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to think about it too. It's like as people look at like, okay, so I'm just out of school, I'm in the South or Midwest, and I'm looking for a place to like, where's cost of living low? Where can I be innovative and not be overly stifled? Arkansas is a great state for that. And I think too, like one of the things we have done in the past, and this is Representative McCollum's bill. He's from Northwest Arkansas, but he did one on like I can't remember what it is, but like when basically like driverless trucks, that they can go and like what is it called? I can't remember what it's called. It's a really cool name, but they have like a couple that will like literally run off. You'll have a driver in one, and he'll have two other trucks behind him that are all running off a similar computer system. And like he, that technology is so new, but he like made sure that Arkansas is a state that allows us to do that. And construction's a big industry here. And the reality is like, you want to talk about like making cheap cost of goods cheaper, like, helping make it to where, a driver can deliver more goods is going to be part of that equation. And so it's like seeing that, I'm like, man, that is awesome. Autonomous driving, making sure that we're a state where you can do that. And then, you think about Elon Musk and like the robo-taxis. I'm watching that, and I'm actually thinking about non-emergent transportation, which has been a massive issue in Arkansas for a long time that we haven't really been able to crack that nut. And so it's like, man, if you're an entrepreneur in Russellville and you think, okay, in the River Valley, I could go out and buy 6 of these robo-taxis. I'm not having to worry about drivers, and I can send them to patients' homes, pick them up, take them to their doctor's appointments, and then get reimbursed. Like that is for the drive. Like that is a new business model. And thank goodness I don't have laws in the way that are going to say, well, actually you can't do that, And I think it's getting laws out of the way so that we can do those new things. I mean, you want to be safe, you want to make sure everything works, but that's also kind of the part of the market too. If it's not a good business, it's gonna die itself. You don't need the government to come and do it. So,
and that's such a brilliant thing because you said a lot of really important information, right?
Yeah.
So Arkansas kind of, when you talked about the fuel cells, there's a lot that goes into that. You got to have the lakes, you got to have the rivers, you got to have the trains.
Yeah.
And then you bounce to, we got to give people a place to live. Arkansas's quality of life is awesome.
Yeah.
And then entrepreneurs, what forward thinking, Aaron, thinking like, hey, if we give entrepreneurs all the opportunity to expand and grow the tools and the resources to do their job, they can build a great thing.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things, and I think some cities have been good at it, some have not, but it's streamlining the process when it comes to getting a new business. I mean, the reality is, like, you think about it, it should be a one-stop shop where I need to go get all my permits and everything. If I can just go to City Hall or the courthouse or whatever one day and get it all done. I think Springdale's done this. It's like they've got a one-stop shop you go into. That's great. And so you think about it, if you walked in and you can talk to the economic developer and you can talk to, like I said, permitting and inspections and all that, get it all done in one fell swoop, like that's going to save you tons of time. And then also the other thing is, there's a lot of fees that go along with that too. And the idea is like, well, hey, we know most businesses don't survive in the first 3 years.
Okay.
But if you can say, well, listen, let's do a deferment plan where if if these fees, and I think in Little Rock, we're talking to a young woman, a part of this program, and she said she literally had to pay like $900 the first year because she got business started in November. And then she had to pay another $900 in January. Man. She's like, I'm out $1,800. And my business is only in its first 4 months, but I'm paying all these fees and taxes that go along with it, and it's just ridiculous. So it's, but the reality is you go, okay, well, and then they'll say, well, these things pay for, necessary things, and you go, okay. How about we just defer that, because we know if we can get them through the first couple of years, and then they can get going, then, it's kind of one of those deals, like, wouldn't you rather have a business that's going to be around here for the next 20 years that will employ people and pay payroll taxes and all these other things that actually produce more money? And so it's, oftentimes in the government, we're really bad about being like penny wise, pound foolish. And so it's like, well, we don't want to, it's like, but I need that $800 now. It's like, how about you wait, because it could be even more later down the road. And so, any entrepreneur or any good business person will tell you, that's a better way. That's how you really invest. And we need to invest in our people. And so I think that's a good way to do it.
Do we have anybody or any programs around here that are set up now where any of those deferred programs business owners or entrepreneurs can take advantage of?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
And so, it's one of those deals where I think a lot of cities and counties could take the initiative. I think the state can be part of that as well and be part of those discussions, because you do. It's like, well, I need to go to City Hall and get this taken care of, but I also got to go file with the Secretary of State's office. And I think that's a little bit of a problem, is we're too siloed. And so how can you make it to where it's all one-stop shop,
That's right.
Make it easy. I love the idea where if you walked in that day by 5 o'clock that evening, you're leaving and you've got all your compliance stuff taken care of, and you can just go and do your business, which is actually what you're looking to do. You're not looking to fill out paperwork. That's not why you got in the game. That's not why you took that risk. And something else interesting about this whole thing is when we talk to entrepreneurs, when we talk about why it took them so long to make the jump, a big part is like healthcare. They'll say, well, I've got a wife and I've got kids, and to me, I need my health insurance. What if something happens?
Yeah. And
so that's a really big, scary thing, because especially, like I said, a lot of companies close in the first 3 years. They may be 3 years without health insurance. Oh,
man.
And so
a lot can happen in 3 years.
Yeah, a ton. And so, that's really been a hard nut to crack, is how do we kind of help these people navigate and get into plans? And that's, a little bit of working with our payers, but also the state, and saying, okay, if someone wants to take this risk, how can we basically tell payers, like, listen, we know they're going to re-enter the workforce, whether their business, grows and then they end up buying plans from y'all, or they end up, the business fails and they end up going and working for someone else and they're on plans. So it's like, why are we, what can we incentivize, or not incentivize, but what can we do to make it to where we can offer these like low-cost health plans for entrepreneurs so that they can actually like make that jump? And so that's been a really difficult nut to crack, and we're still working on that. But that's, one of the things that I think people don't even think about. It's like, when you talk about like we want to be a pro-business state, it's like, okay, but that's a big part of it. It's like, why? So why are we people making the jump as much as we wish they would? And that's one of the reasons. So I think and that's the thing, is I think we have to be really innovative, and I think we should really push our policymakers to be as innovative as possible. Because and one of the things I love is, the governor will say, no more status quo, and I'm like, yeah, there we go. Because the reality is, like, and I think this is what you see so much with the last presidential election, is like you hear a lot of people like why they voted, for Trump and Vance, and people say, well, I voted because I liked RFK, I liked Elon Musk, I liked all this, like, this group of really like unique individuals that kind of came from all different perspectives. Like, people are really desperate for change, and I think they really want to see something happen. and just going on this current path of status quo, just people are getting frustrated. And so it's one of those deals where sometimes you find that a lot of people will push back against change. But, I remind people all the time, like, we're one of the most unhealthy states in the nation, so we have to work on that. Our great place to live, quality of life's great, but, we're still, our wages are still pretty low. And if we want to rise and increase and grow more economically, like, we've got to get more aggressive. And so we have to be innovative. And so, that's one of the things I really think that we need to push for in this next session, because I think what we saw, like I said, nationally, was there is a desire to see that change.
There is a desire for change.
And I think the Arkansas legislature would be really foolish not to embrace that people are wanting change, and we should give them change and deliver on it. I mean, I think they like, our, who we are. I mean, obviously the Republicans won 81 of 100 seats. We have a supermajority. So they like what we're doing. I think they like our conservative values. And so I wouldn't say any change on that, but I think it's the change on some of the other things. It's like, where their frustration, a lot of us were out there campaigning, and it's people coming up and telling us their frustration. And so I think the reality is like, hey, we've been given this mandate. They trust us and our values. Let's put those values to work and create a change in a direction I think that they want us to go, which is a conservative direction. And what is the conservative ways to help encourage entrepreneurship? What's a conservative policy way to, do that? And a lot of that's, of course, lowering taxes, deregulation, things like that. But, it's okay, great. And then, make sure that we're also doing that for the entrepreneurs, not just the big businesses. Make sure we're doing it for the small guys as well. And I think that's really important to keep in mind.
Man, that is such a brilliant thought, because the fear of the unknown in medical expenses, what you would have come out of the unknown of being able to start a business, having the ability to forward think and put plans in place, because you're going to get those objectives again. Somebody's going to say, hey, listen, I don't want to jump into this $1 billion business. Great idea, because I don't know how I'm going to get from A to B. And outlining how those programs can go into place would certainly release some of the tension and the thoughts of it all.
No, I agree. And that's it. I mean, I think sometimes, it's just good to talk to people and say, okay, what made you do it, And then even to the people who did make the jump despite not having health insurance, they may say, well, I'm 28 years old, just me and my wife, I don't have kids, we're both really healthy, we know we can,
we're going to give it a go.
We're going to give it a go. Whereas granted, if you've got some guy who's, maybe 45 and he's got 3 kids, and he knows he has to pay for braces and all these other things, like he's gonna be like, but I don't want it to just be for the young guys and the young girls. Like I want the guy who's been working for the past 20 years in an industry and say, man, I think I can make a go for
mastered a craft and ready to do it on his own in a bigger and better way.
And I even think too, some of our people who they already are essentially, I don't think they would classify themselves as entrepreneur, but they really are some tradesmen, things like that. They're like, hey, I'm a subcontractor, but I really kind of own my own business and I do this. It's like, and you're having to pay this,
That's right.
Can we get a better plan for you so that your healthcare expense isn't so high that you're like, oh, this is terrible. I can't, I can half of what my net income is coming to this. And so, or I guess it wouldn't be net income, but half of my gross is going to this. And so I think it's one of those deals we really need to focus in on that and try to figure out a way to solve it. Because if we want to see entrepreneurs grow, you got to ask them, what are your pain points? Not just what I think your pain points are, but what are your actual real pain points? And, a lot of times like, well, it's your business and your business costs. It's like, well, think about, we're not, we're holistic people. I mean, what are the other parts around us that's not just, the business part, but it's, what about my family? What about my 401k? What about all those things? I mean, all those things, affect the decision making of the person, and so you have to make sure those also get addressed too. Which I think sometimes in the past, people have been really bad about. They just want to focus on a very narrow scope and don't look at a holistic approach. Which is, if it, you can have a really good business and fail, and it's like, well, why did it fail? And it's like, it's like, well, I mean, management was so busy trying to do other things because. They
couldn't devote the time and attention to it
because they were trying to keep themselves whole in a way. So,
you've had an opportunity to be around so much different policies from different things that have been introduced. And can you remember any pivotal policies or positions that you've taken along your career?
Pivotal policies or positions in my career. I mean, I feel like there's always a ton.
It's like, which day are we talking to?
Yeah. I mean, gosh, I mean, there's ones that were like, real big legislative fights. I mean, obviously, when I passed Stand Your Ground, that was a big fight, which was funny. You would think in a state like Arkansas wouldn't be that big of a deal, but the way the committee was stacked on judiciary, I couldn't lose a single Republican vote, and so I need to get all that. But that was really the heartache. But then, of course, too, there were people who came out, and just were like, said a lot of terrible things about me during the
imagine that slander in politics.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it was good that we passed it. And really it was just getting rid of the duty to retreat, which is essentially is stand your ground. And that was kind of a pivotal moment in a way, because I think it also it showed a lot of people, I'm going to have that hard fight, and all those, you can say whatever you want about me and call me whatever terrible name you want to, but I'm still going to do it. I'm still going to pass that law. And also too, that I'm not an emotions-based decision maker. I'm a data decision maker.
Right.
And so, I always tell people, show me the data, it's funny too. I will say I'm almost an anti-alarmist when people come to me and it's like, if you pass this, the world's going to fall apart. It's like, first off, I know that's not true. And the fact you have to lie to me about it makes me think that your policy is not a good policy. And so, it's funny. I always get like turned off when people say like, this is the end all be all. And, I'd say funny things like on maternal health. I do a lot on maternal health. I've been working really feverishly on that. And I kind of remind people, because I've got my policies and there's other policies people are pushing, and the governor just announced yesterday $13 million that she's going to put towards that for DHS, which my understanding is going to go to enhance reimbursement and unbundling the payment structure for opioids. All great stuff. Love it.
Good stuff.
It's really good stuff. And so people have been like, well, okay, so what about your bill on the 12-month postpartum care? I guess we don't need that now. I'm like, no, we do.
Yeah, we need it all.
We need it all. There's like 12 policies we need to probably do. These are all parts of the same deal. I was like, that's why you don't hear me, and this goes back to the alarms, that's why you don't hear me going around saying, well, we have to do this one thing because this one thing will solve it all, because that's not true. I mean, especially these like systemic issues that we have in our state, it's a lot of things working in tandem, and it kind of goes back to like the entrepreneurship thing about like this holistic approach. It's all the things. It's not just the health insurance. It's not just the reimbursement rate. It's not just the licensing requirements. It's not just the lack of providers. It's all these things together you have to work on to get your solution. So, but pivotal policy, the provider-led organized shared savings entity, which deals with behavioral health and developmental disability, that was one that was my first term. It was not super controversial. When it started rolling out, it was, because people were, their plans were getting changed. There was a bunch of reorganization, but the reality is we were able to, get a lot of people off the Medicaid waiver waiting list, which was huge. I mean, for some of those families who had been on there for a really long time, that was big. It's ticked back up again. We'll need to work to get it back down, but it's not been perfect. But to me, it's, I've talked to a lot of people who originally were upset by it, who have kind of come around and actually said, when the dust finally settled, when everything got, smoothed out, our care coordinator's great. We like the system it's going now. But it was pivotal, and it was what the state needed to do, because the costs were getting so high, and it was, some people were getting a lot, some people were getting nothing, and then too we were under all these rules and regs that made it impossible to do things kind of outside the box, which I'm a big outside the box kind of guy, and so trying to help this population, they're very unique in what they need, and so you really need to have it. And then of course too, the reason we didn't do just like, we did, it's called provider-led organized shared savings. It really is, because the idea is the board is made up of 51% of these doctors. So they're making decisions, not the health insurance companies. And so that's been really helpful. And so, the health insurance companies are definitely on some of these boards too, making decisions. But the reality, the buck stops with the providers who are saying, okay, I'm a provider, but I'm also, leading this payer. So what's the good medium to make sure that we're also doing this? And of course, too, there's quality measures, because we want good quality care to be part of that too. That's helpful. So, that was a really pivotal moment, I think, in Arkansas, because it was a way for us to really tackle a really difficult healthcare situation, and do something better. And it's also, I'm glad people stood strong, because I remember when it first passed, there were people who said, we just need to get rid of this, we need to repeal it, it was a bad idea, who now would not agree with that statement at all.
That's right. And you wouldn't realize it, but so much of policy and changes probably surround healthcare in some type of way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you think about the two things the state spends the most money on right now.
Okay.
It's education is number one. So between K through 12 and higher ed, I mean, that's over about 50% of our budget.
Oh,
so
50%?
Yeah, around that. I'd have to go and look at the exact numbers, but so it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot. And then the other one is healthcare, which is probably, I would say, if you look at a chart, it looks like it's almost 50, but it's not, because we still have corrections and some of these other things that we do a lot of. But so it's funny, you always hear about politics talk about health and education. It's like, well, that's where we spend most of our money. So, but yeah, so there's obviously a big chunk of money goes there, and of course too from the feds. That's a lot of money comes in the state of Arkansas from the federal government too. So there's a lot of money in it, and so because of that though, because we spend so much money, we're way more involved in it. Which is kind of, it's funny because, I'll put it this way, sometimes people will say, like, I wish y'all would just, stop doing so much on healthcare. And it's like,
we can't.
We're
in too deep.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, the feds are requiring us to do this. We have to be in here and we have to be making these changes. But then I would say, too, what I remind myself, too, when it comes to a lot of policy is, like, the ultimate person that we are charged to take care of is the patient. It's not the provider. It's not the health insurance companies. It's not the pharmacy companies.
Yes.
It's the pharmaceutical companies. It's the patient. And if you're patient-centered, when you think about the policies, it's like things start to clear up way easier. And so,
That's right.
And granted, it's like, well, you can't worry about the patient if the providers aren't paid enough. 100% true. Same with the pharmacist. But at the same point of the day, it's like, are these policies aimed at making life better for the patient and helping them achieve better health outcomes? Or are they policies that are just there to make life easier on
the provider, the healthcare?
Yeah, and I love my providers, and I love our payers and everyone. It's just, but at the end of the day, to me, the ultimate test is this good for the people we're aiming to serve? Because that's really our charge when you think about it, is the patient. Patient needs to come first.
Think about the constituents,
yeah,
the people that you have an opportunity to serve. They elected you to represent their best interest, and aligning your vision with theirs is ultimately the goal, I would think.
Yeah. No, I would agree. I mean, it's funny too, because your constituents are also the providers. and
that's true.
And but there's always a balancing act, and my always philosophy has been, if you take care of the patient first, the other things fall into place. And I would say too, the providers are there to take care of the patient. I mean, they have a heart to serve, and they want to take care of their patients, and so. But it's just, sometimes things get muddled, back and forth, and you hear this policies this way and that way. And, to me, it's just kind of like the North Star when you need to, calm all the crazy thoughts or not crazy thoughts, but crazy things you're hearing from this side or that side or this person. It's like, okay, ultimately look at this. At the end of the day, the patient who's going to walk through those doors, what is going to be a policy that benefits them and helps them actually get better,
which would help everybody along the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Well, and it helps us. I mean, the reality is, like, we have a healthier state, we end up lowering our costs for health, and if we lower our costs, how much we're spending on healthcare, and that means we can lower our taxes. So and then make ourselves more competitively economically. So it's really interesting too, because I'm chair of the Employee Benefits Division Oversight Committee, and so, or co-chair, we chair with the senator. And so, we're constantly looking at, basically that's the largest health plan in the state. And, I'm constantly looking at, okay, well, if we can actually make this plan better for the people, the patients, and actually find, what are really effective ways where we can actually try to make their health better. Mm-hmm. Because if we make their health better, then that actually frees up money that we're not having to pump in from general revenue to sustain it, that can go into other things that we can help the state grow. So it's, I would say there's a massive economic impact on the state having to spend so much on healthcare, that if we could reduce that spend, that would be phenomenal, and that helps us be able to cut taxes. Of course, the flip side is you also want to make sure that you've got a healthy population, so you have a healthy workforce and everything. So it's a balancing act, and I think
these things have to happen together.
Yeah, and that's what makes it really hard. Is it's like, man, I've got to figure out a way to make sure people are healthy, and also at the same time make sure that we're not spending so much to where people are overtaxed, where they can't have businesses, things like that. We've done really well. We've almost halved our income tax since I've been in office, which is fantastic. I don't think people ever thought we could get there. The plan is to get to zero. We're working on that, but it's kind of managing all the things. And I would say too, to me, the smart conservative approach is, healthy living, healthy choices for our people, so that ultimately we're not paying large healthcare expenses later down the road. And you
So
think about it like
cardiologists,
cardiology, issues and obesity issues.
Yes.
All those are massive chronic conditions that we end up spending a ton of money on. And in reality, if we can prevent that, especially like when they're young, I mean, think about childhood obesity is on the rise in the state. If you could solve childhood obesity in the state, the amount of money you would then save over the course of that child from the state is massive. Same with maternal health. I kind of say this over and over again, but like the 12-month bill I was talking about, that bill, you're saying, well, you are going to spend a little more. You're right. I was like, but if we reduce our maternal mortality rate, think about that. Those mothers don't die; they live. That's good for us, but it's also good for the child, because that child usually becomes ward of the state, and then the amount of money we spend on it. So it's funny. You may be upset that we're spending, I think now with the latest report came out, I think we're looking at just below $1 million to extend the program. Like, you're worried about maybe spending $1 million here. I was like, I want you to calculate the cost of every child whose mother died within that first year of life, and when they became a ward of the state, how much we end up paying out. And not to mention, because especially they don't have a father in the picture, I mean, there's all sorts of welfare programs and things like that that's going to go to that child that we're paying for ultimately. It's like, so it actually and then of course, do you think about the societal, think about the kid and the psychological issues they'll have to deal with for the rest of their life, growing up without a mother, all those things. And there's a lot of people who grew up with mothers who turn out great and no issue. Yeah. But I mean, I think we all would say it's preferable that the mother didn't die. And it's like all these things that kind of ripple through. And it's, to me as a legislator, as a policymaker, it's always important to me to like look down the roads, and it's like, so really it's like, I'll spend this little bit here and it will save us drastically down the road in our state.
I think the normal person wouldn't realize that all of those outside catalysts need to be considered with any type of policy.
Yeah.
It's not just being able to read something on a docket and be like, okay, this is saying X, Y, Z, we're in favor of it. You have to think about everything in all aspects of the well-being of that.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, one of the reasons why health policy is so difficult, right? Because people want to say like, I don't want to spend this extra money on this. It's like, well, you have to think about the long-term cost savings. And then they'll say, and especially for some people, those are 10 years down the line. It's like, well, I'm not going to see those realized gains. But I would argue, you put money in your 401k when you're in your 20s, and you're not going to see those for 30 years, but you believe it to be true because we've seen that it ends up being true. And same with this. I mean, you look at states, I think, that have invested in preventative care early on, they end up having better health outcomes. Yeah. But, and this is something else I love to talk about too with you, because I'd be interested to get your take on it. But I think too, it's also, there's like a culture aspect. It's like, do we do things today? Do we plant trees today, knowing that we may never see them to be full grown, but that they know that it's better for future generations? We've done a good job of that, creating all these reserve funds. Starting under Asa, Sarah Huckabee Sanders has kind of done the same thing, which is really good for us because when BB left, there's not much in our reserve funds, and we were in kind of an economic crisis around there. Not bad, but it was not great, and we built those back up in all these rainy day funds. So in the future, if we ever do have bad situations, we can still cut taxes and still kind of pay for the services we need to do. But that is a culture, I think, that like we always need to instill into our policymakers, and all won't be in this seat forever, but future policymakers of, I want you to think about not just the here and now, but where we're going to be at a state 20 years from now. Is there a vision for who we are? And I think that's a culture shift, as opposed to just, what is there right now? What can we slap on a mailer that looks good? I want to know what the plan is.
I think you're exactly right. That is a mindset in a culture change, because people have very little attention spans. We're in that instant now culture. I want my Amazon delivered in 2 days. I want to get to the meat and the potatoes of the video within 3 seconds. People have that instant now. So trying to let them know, like, hey, this policy that comes in effect today isn't really going to take off or make a lot of sense until, we're 20 years from now. Yeah. That's a hard mindset.
It's a really hard mindset, especially when you deal in the world of politics, Yes. People want instant results. They want to cut the ribbons. They want to, what I mean?
That's
like,
right.
They went like, now.
Let's go.
And it's frustrating, but even on like some like large economic development projects I've been a part of, like they take years and years, and you'll have ones that, maybe don't work out, but it's like you had to plant all those seeds and to get to that point, and it just, you have to learn delayed gratification. I mean, that's
gratification.
You
have to learn.
Yeah, that's a key to success. There's a way you can get delayed gratification taught to every child in Arkansas. We would in 20 years, we would be the best state in the nation, hands down. I mean, I think we're already the best state in the nation, but I think you would just see like a monstrous growth in Arkansas because being able to do that, and it's hard for me too. You know what I mean? It's hard for everybody, but once you master that, I mean, really, it's just, you can do anything.
You know, you've talked a lot about how you got started in politics young, and what if there was somebody that was watching and they're thinking, hey, I'm interested in diving into it, what's kind of some advice that you would give them on what they could do to kind of enhance a journey into it?
So I would say the first thing you need to do, and I would say this directly to the camera, what I would do is I would sit in a room and I would ask myself, why do I actually want to do this? Do I want to do this because I want to run and see my name on billboards and everything, or do I want to run because I actually want to achieve something? Because I always think about this, if you have a mission of what you want to get accomplished, you will you'll make it happen, and you can take the slings and arrows and everything that come along with it with running for office. So that would be the first thing. But then I would just say, go and talk to people who are in office already.
That's right.
Ask them about let's say you want to run for like city council in Russellville. Go talk to some of the city council members who you wouldn't be running against. Don't talk to the one you will be. Just ask what it's like. How's it going? Try to see how their life fits in with your life, and how, maybe you're going to have to make some lifestyle changes, things like that, to accommodate. I'm basically going to make sure you can do the job, and that you actually understand what the job entails. There's a lot of people who will run for an office, and, I'll hear them and see them on Facebook, or they'll say something, and I'm like, that's not what we do.
That's not okay.
Yeah, and you're like, well, even too, just like the job, like it's like, I'm gonna. What was it? Someone's talking to me the other day, and they just they said something, and I was like, you realize I'm a state legislator, right? Like I have no ability to affect like the Trump's cabinet appointments. Like I don't get a vote on that. Like you do understand that, and so I think it's one of those deals where it's like, make sure you actually know what the job does.
That's brilliant.
So those are kind of two like basic things. But then after that, it's so you go out, you figure out why you want to run, you kind of figure out what all it entails, and then I would go and just talk to your friends and families and just say, this is what I'm looking to do. Do I have your support? Do you think it's a good idea? And kind of get that kitchen cabinet of advisors of you who are gonna be your sounding board, who are gonna kind of tell you, it's a good idea, or no, or have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And I'd say I've probably talked to more people who end up not running for office than people I've talked to end up running for office.
Sure.
Because they do that. They go, actually it seemed cool and it seemed like a good idea, but actually I think about it and it just doesn't fit my life. Or, well, I really care about this one issue, and then I talk to a city council member and they're actually working on it right now, and I can help them that way, and I can get what I want done. And, that way then I'm not then serving for another 3 years trying to get something fixed when that was the only thing I really cared about. But, if you have a heart for service and you want to do it, get that group together, and then, then you just kind of start making a plan of, okay, I need to raise X amount of money to do this, and I need to get a schedule and realize I need to go out and talk to people and do events and all things, and all that stuff's real technical. But I would say, the main thing is just make sure you know why you're running, why you want to be in that office. And then, of course, the second thing is that you have a full understanding of what the job is, that you can do the job.
And the commitment that it takes.
Yeah, I would say, part of the job is like the commitment, because, some people think it's going to take up, so much of their life, and they find, oh, wow, I can actually do this, because it's not that hard going to a city council meeting, once a month, or kind of deal, or emergency meetings when we have them. Other people, may say, well, that's, I was thinking maybe once a quarter. It's like, well, that's not how it works. So
now, what kind of community involvement would you recommend somebody that is considering a career in politics consider doing?
That's really hard to tell. I had one member tell me one time when he was running, everyone kind of asked him like, well, why didn't you join the Rotary Club when you were running, or why didn't you do that? And he's like, because I wasn't part of those when I wasn't running. It's like, it's inauthentic, So I think just do the community events that you are already doing. I don't think you need to go out there and join the Rotary and join Lions and join things. All those are great groups to join. So, so don't get me wrong. I think that it's important to be involved. But if you want to be a part of those, you should be a part of those. Because otherwise, I just think it comes off as just not genuine. And, you know, and so that I would say that if you should be involved in your community, but be involved in the community things you're passionate about, that whether or not you're in public office, it doesn't affect whether or not you're in it. Because, you know, so the flip side of that story is, you know, you have people who they join all these clubs and they're in office and this and that, and then they leave office or they don't win re-election or they don't win their first election, and then they quit. And it's like, and then so it's funny, you run again and you do the same thing, and everyone's like, you're fake. You're not real.
You're only here when it's an election year.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that's just, and so so I would say do the things that you genuinely care about. And so, you know, if that's being part of your, you know, Knights of Columbus, great. If that's, you know, just being part of your T-ball league and helping out with that, like, that's great. Like, community service you know, and being part of your community doesn't necessarily have to be part of some of those, like, civic clubs. It can be a whole host of things. Maybe you just, you know, you're really involved with the boosters. So, but I will say, before you initially run for office, you probably should just think about, like, do I do anything in my community? Because if you don't, it's going to be really hard for the people to think that you have a genuine concern and care about what's going on. Now, granted, it's hard. I mean, people work, they got families, so, you know, it's not, I can't say not, you know, like, if it's like, well, I'm not part of any civic club, so I shouldn't run. Like, I'm not saying that at all. Because I think when I first ran, I probably wasn't into it. But it is, and it's. But also, it's like, do you understand what are the needs of your community? You know, I mean, you might think what they are when you and your buddies are, you know, sitting on the back porch drinking a beer, and, you know, be like, well, this is what we need.
This is what,
yeah. But when you actually go and talk to people and kind of see, oh, these are actually the real needs. You know, there's things we think are important, but then there's the actual, you know, other things, and so. Which is, you know, and that's, I think, probably go back to the advice, like running, like, you know, really you should honestly talk to your people and go, what are the actual needs of my community? What needs fixing and what doesn't? Because it's great to talk about, we're going to build a skate park, you know, it's like, you know, it's like great. It's like, but we have a homeless issue. Like, you know, maybe we need to address that before we address the skate park. Because we don't want homeless people sleeping all over the skate park. But, you know, and I'm just, these are just examples. You know, I'm, you know, pull them out of thin air. But I do think it's just important to kind of understand that need. And granted, someone could make the argument to me, hey, actually, you know, doing a skate park and having a place for kids to play is really good to kind of helping foster that community atmosphere we're trying to do. And, you know, we'll make sure the homeless don't sleep there, and we can work on two problems at once. And that's another thing too. I tell people, it's like, you can work on multiple problems at once. Like, there's 1,000 issues. Like, you can have your issues you care about and kind of let other people. And that's kind of the nice thing about the legislature is, like, you know, there's a lot of trust built in there where, you know, I'm not hands on super deep in maybe like one particular issue, because I know someone else is who I trust and who I know is on the issue and has the same philosophy as me. You know, great, you still got to read the bills and you know, talk to them and have your questions answered, but you don't have to be there in the day and day. Just like with me, like, I've been on public health, you know, for forever now, and so a lot of people kind of look to me on health issues, you know, and I'll get, you know, hey, is this a good bill? You know, is this going to do what we want to do? And you talk about it and you answer their questions. Like, okay, I feel better about it, you know, knowing you're, you know, if you think it's good, I trust you on those issues, because I don't know the difference between, you know,
well, you have
this. People say, like, I don't know the difference between Medicare and Medicaid, and you're like, okay, well, don't worry, I got you, you know, or you know, stuff like that. I think, and so there's a lot of trust that goes into that because there are like 1,000 issues. So,
you know, and that's kind of a perfect segue into this controversial question.
Okay.
So you know, you're a dad, you're a husband, you know, a man of faith, you have your own principles and your own things that guide you, and then you have a group of constituents that you represent.
Yeah.
How do you find a balance between like what you think is right and what people are bringing to the table that they
Yeah. No, that's a great question, because I will see this, you know, and I used to be the campaign chair for the caucus, so for a while. I wasn't this last cycle, but I was the 2 previous cycles. And so, you know, I'm reading campaign literature from all over the state and seeing what, you know, opposition's saying, things like that. And people would say things like, you know, I'm going to represent everyone. And you're like, well, but not on every issue, because it's not, everyone's not in agreement 100% of the time, you know. I mean, how are you going to represent your pro-choice constituent and your pro-life constituent on...
Which is the hottest topic right now.
How are you going to represent both of them, you know? And so... or the guy who wants his taxes lowered or the guy who wants his taxes raised to pay for some service. Like, how are you going to do both? And so, it sounds good, but the practicality is not there. No, I think as you kind of balance these things, there's great advice is, you hear this all the time, vote your conscience, vote your district. If you
vote your conscience, vote your district.
Most of the time, if you're a good representative of your area, typically those things fall in line all the time. It's like, this is what my district wants, and I am perfectly okay with it. You might have some times where it's politically popular in your area to vote one way, but you feel in your heart of hearts that that maybe is not the best policy. I typically would say, vote your conscience, because ultimately at the end of the day, you're going to have to stand before God and account for everything you ever did. And right is right, whether everyone agrees with you or no one agrees with you. And so if you have to give up your political career because you made the right move, you should give up your political career because you have to do what's ultimately right. And that's ultimately your soul. And so it's a hard pill to swallow because people will say, I gave the last 10 years of my life to being in office and doing these things, and I might lose my seat over this vote. And it's like, well, but is it worth losing your soul? I mean, what is the line from with St. Thomas More? It's in the movie A Man of All Seasons. He sees his former assistant or whatever who just, I think, has betrayed Thomas More, and I think he became the governor of Wales or something like that. Sure. And he says, he's like, you gave your soul for this position, and it's like, how hollow is that? And so I wish I could. I need to actually find. I'm butchering the quote and everything, but it's a good point. It's like at the end of the day, it's like it's what is the most important to you? And I tell people all the time, God comes first in my life. And because of that, everything cascades down around it.
Sure.
And so as long as I am doing that, then I am ultimately okay with what happens and take the slings and arrows that come along with the decision, whether it's popular or not. And so there's, that's ultimately what you have to do. So, and people may hate you for it, but at the end of the day, like I said, you have to stand before God and you have to atone for all the things you've done. Yeah. And, when I'm standing in front of God, I want to say, I made the right decision. I made the decision I think that you would be happy with, not the decision I thought the constituents would be happy with that would anger you. I'm more afraid of angering God than I am of anyone else.
And there's absolutely so much that comes from making decisions with conviction. You know, in your heart of hearts, what's right is right, what wrong is wrong, and ultimately we're going to side on the side of right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say too, and this is, taking it down a notch, not as serious as that whole conversation just was, but, there are sometimes you have issues where it's like, this is not a moral issue. It's not a conscious issue. It's like, okay, green or blue is the color of the bathroom. You know what I mean?
Some things aren't as
they're not as crazy. And you're having to think, and, it's real easy to go, well, talked to a lot of people back home and they all want red, and okay, great, that's what we'll do. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't really care if it was blue or red. That's what they want. Great. And so and that's I'm trying to think of an issue that's been like that. There's been occasion ones where it's just like, like I said, you do 2,000 votes, so it's like, it can't be, you're not going to die on 2,000 hills during session. There's one, it's like, should the gosh, what was it? Well, I know there's one in Tennessee, and I always bring it up about license reform, but they had some bill about 800 hours you had to have for shampooing someone's hair before you could get licensed, and that's crazy.
That is crazy.
And so I think they took it down, and they're debating, and it's like, well, it should be 20 hours or 18 hours. It's like, wow, that 2-hour difference in the reform is the big question. You're really taking it down. That is not the that's okay. I'm not laying awake at night trying to figure out if it's that 2-hour difference, how big of a deal that's gonna be.
You've achieved so much in the time that you've been in office. What's next for you?
I don't know. Politics is so fluid. You just never know. You know what I mean? I don't think anyone thought Donald Trump would be going down that escalator in 2016 and totally upending American politics. And And same with like, you know, when Sarah Sanders came back to run for governor, I mean, you have Lieutenant Governor who's now the Lieutenant Governor, Leslie Rutledge running, and Tim Griffin, who's now Attorney General. I mean, they thought the race was going to be between them two. And that's what everyone else did. And then she, like, you know, came in and cleared the field. And so it's funny, too, because you had people who were running for the positions they were leaving who all of a sudden, you know, it's like this like ripple effect. And so same with, you know, you just don't know with the new administration if Bruce Westerman's going to get, you know, pulled to run some agency or something, and then suddenly that seat's open, and, you know, I might run for that, you know, or, you know, Stubblefield gets appointed, you know, something, and then, you know, I'll run for that.
And there's an open seat.
There's an open, so you might run. I mean, I'm not one of these, like, overly I am ambitious, but I'm not one of these people who's like, I'm going to like push people out of the way. I mean, we've got a lot of good, solid conservative people like Bruce Westerman, like Gary Stubblefield, who, you know, I would never dream about primarying them because in my mind, they're doing a good job. And it's
that's
like,
right.
It's about the mission, not me. And so
that's brilliant.
And that's the reality. The mission is to get a conservative state that's moving forward, that's growing economically, and that's upholding our traditional values. And like, we're all doing that. So I don't need to push anyone out of the way. You know, it's like, and, you know, if you're just doing it just because you got to be at the next seat, it's like people are going to see that you are not genuine for your desire to serve. And I think the voters have a really good, like, sniff test on those things. And they'll say, no, I don't want you. So, you know, to answer your question, I don't know what's really next for me. You know, it's so funny because I'm into policy stuff. So, I mean, I love just focusing on, like, you know, bills to run next session. I had someone in the governor's office. I was like literally going to my list of like 23 drafts, and they were like, "Wow, you like really love being a legislator." And I'm like, "Well, I mean, like it's
what we're here to do.
It's what I'm here to do." Yeah, I mean, it's like I ran to serve. Like I just don't want to be one of these people who like comes down here and doesn't run a bill and just you know takes up a seat. Like I'm here to work, and I'm here to make life better for my constituents, and so that's what I'm gonna do. And so I've just really enjoyed that right now. And so I don't, you know, to me, it's kind of hard to think about what's next. Because like I said, you just never know. I mean, you know, I could literally walk out of here and get hit by a bus. So it wouldn't even matter. It wouldn't even matter what my plans were. But, you know, I could say, you know, that's my focus right now. And then, you know, it's hard having young kids. And that makes it really hard. I see a lot of politicians who have been in office for a very long times, have had a lot of struggle with their children, you know. And so I want to make sure my kids come first. And so, you know, to me, that's also a consideration is, you know, maybe I take a beat and let them grow up and get back in the game.
That's right.
But if I were to do anything, the first consideration would be, am I still able to be the dad that I currently am able to be in my spot? Which I am. You know, I'm only an hour, 20 minutes from the Capitol. So most nights during session, I'm back home with them. You know, I'm able to put them down to bed and be with them, which is great. You know, if I lived, you know, I was talked to one legislator who I think it was Kansas or Nebraska or something. It was one of those like middle states, and you know, he was like 6 hours away or something crazy like that. So he's like, when I'm in session, I just don't go home, and it's like, I'm like, that's really hard on your kids. I mean, that's really hard. So I mean, you know, kudos to you. And actually, it's funny. Britt McKenzie, he's a freshman legislator. He's got 4 kids. He's got another one on the way. So he's got 5. So he's my age. He had 2 sets of twins. He's really good about, you know, his wife brings them all down during session, so he's able to spend time with them while they're session. It's like, you know, he's kind of the same deal. It's like being dad, that is my job first. You know, and same things, like I said, like when you put God first, like that comes first, your spouse comes first, your kids come first, and like you put those things in perspective, like you're gonna have a way better life, and like, you know, you have a way better home life. And so kind of rambling on about this, sorry, but like to me it's where my focus is. Like my number one job is to be a good father and a good husband and to be a good follower of God. And so like those things come first. And so if I can do those things and serve as a state rep and have my other job, like I can do it right now. I feel like I'm doing a good job. I'll keep doing it. But when it comes to in the future, if for some reason I'm gonna have to I'll sacrifice my political ambitions in favor of anyone else, in favor of my children and my wife, because ultimately that's the most important thing. And that is the true legacy I'll have is my family. And so that's number one.
Y'all, if you want to connect with Aaron, he is easy to get a hold of and would absolutely love to know if there's something he can do as a constituent of his district. If not, he'll get you the answers you need. Aaron, thank you so much for jumping on, man. It has been incredible getting to talk with you today.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.